listening and like, is this something I need to be worried about or not?
I think it's, pardon the expression, more insidious in a way. It sort of seeps in.
There's something really orally pleasurable about it, but it's also like, no, please make it stop.
That kind of weird discord to suddenly make you feel kind of off kilter, off balance.
This is the AV Club's Why We Love, an examination into the sometimes subconscious reasons we're drawn to our pop culture obsessions. In this episode, famous composers and horror fans reflect on the most frightening scores in cinematic history, and we investigate what makes the music of scary movies so unforgettable. This is Why We Love Horror Scores.
The first scary movie I saw was when I was about 2.5 to 3 years of age. And my parents took me to the Majestic Theater downtown Dallas to see Godzilla. And I had no idea what horror films were. I thought Godzilla was a documentary. I thought this is the way the world really is. I was petrified. And I remember the music of that movie was incredibly dun-da-dun, dun-da-dun, dun-dun, dun-da-dun, dun-da-dun, dun-dun.
Probably the first horror movie soundtrack that I really remember was Jaws. I don't think I've been in the ocean since I was a little kid. And certainly John Williams' score had a lot to do with that.
I think when we're young growing up, we are amazed at feeling something. We're amazed at feeling joy. And we are particularly amazed at feeling terror. And I think horror films are the safe way children experience terror. For horror films, we feel like we can see them and control them.
The score for horror movies is one of the most important elements of it. And I've even told my daughter, if she's ever afraid watching something, just turn off the sound. You turn off the sound, it won't be as scary.
When I talk to composers, one of the names that pops up almost every single time is Bernard Herrmann. And of course, horror fans, know his work best from Psycho. I think the general consensus is that he was experimental in his own way almost before experimentation in film music was a thing.
Psycho for me was the first time I was aware that music literally catapulted me into a bad place, into a really scary place. I didn't get in the shower comfy for a long time after those things.
And even his way he would record the orchestra was very cutting edge. You can put mutes on strings, which kind of gives it a dull sound. He would have the orchestra play and start adding mutes like as they were playing and do these things at the time that were just unheard of.
With The Day the Earth Stood Still, he introduces the theremin, which is kind of a really early use of electronic music in some fashion in film music.
Anytime I hear a theremin, I know there's something from outer space coming and that the budget probably wasn't over $1 million for the entire film.
I don't necessarily think it was his intention to create something that was totally unique. I think he was trying to find the voice of those films, but he was hearing that voice in a way that other composers wasn't hearing at the time. And it led to a tradition of experimentation in film music or thrillers and suspense that still we have today.
In just, a history of film scores, it's often the horror movies that introduced new colors, new instrumental combinations, electronics. All of these things made it to film scores through the horror and suspense genre.
Sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink.
When you score a horror movie, it's like you can throw in everything and the kitchen sink. Like really, there's no limitation. Especially with technology today, they can use any sound that they want. But with horror movies, atmosphere is such an important thing. And how that atmosphere is created doesn't necessarily even have to be musical in a traditional sense.
The first thing that's coming to mind probably is John Carpenter, because I just love the simplicity of his scores. his kind of style of horror scores is so emulated now. I mean, the Halloween theme.
I remember I was so scared when I saw it for the first time. And yeah, the music, even if I heard now, I would start looking around and feeling nervous. You know, when you listen to it, it's like, this isn't right.
The simplicity of just those several piano notes it's incredible. You know, you don't need much more than that kind of weird discord to suddenly make you feel kind of off kilter, off balance.
And I'm thinking of Eyes Wide Shut, but like a beautiful classical music, but like everything's wrong. I think those are the examples when like what you're seeing on screen is actually really discordant with the music.
I feel like that's what I really appreciate about horror music in general. It's not just going to tell you exactly how to feel in your discomfort zone.
So when an image may be beautiful, but you're playing some eerie music, that tells you how to feel, but just the opposite is true. Whereas if you're playing something that feels really positive, but what you're seeing is horrific on screen, I think anything can be turned scary if it's in opposition to what you're seeing.
Ultimately with horror, it's like you want to create the feeling of fear and suspense in any way possible without having to like show too much.
There's not any particular memorable themes from The Shining, but you remember the dread, you remember the tension, and of course you remember the main theme. But other than that, it's mainly that kind of sort of just intensity of constant tension, and I feel like it drains you as you're watching as a viewer, and which is kind of the intention.
It's unsettling, but it still allows you to figure out in what way you feel unsettled.
I think a lot of it is like psychological. It's like trickery. It's like doing things that are unconventional. It's playing with expectations.
I think we underestimate the power of a score often. You know, you're not, if you're not aware of the music, sometimes that's a good thing because it's already working on you. It's working on you emotionally and it's working on you physically within the story of the film and how it complements the story and amplifies the story.
There's a through line between slightly unsettled to really disturbed to freaked out to screaming your head off, and there, you have to be able to musically draw that line so that the drama of that plays out in a way that matches the script and what the characters are experiencing.
I think more than the scare of it is sort of about the deconstruction of what leads up to the scare musically.
Huh? It's okay, honey.
When you're working on a horror score, you have an enormous amount of power as a composer. But horror often has long sequences that have no dialogue, that are leading up to something, and you set the overall tone, and you, in a lot of ways, you control the big scare, or you tell the audience when to be afraid.
And that's always really crucial in horror, that you just have no idea whether, maybe the main character is really going to get blown away in the first reel, and you can't trust anything. And a score that's just really unusual helps you think, okay, maybe I don't know, maybe I can't take anything for granted, and I should be really scared.
For me, I just think of my favorite horror movie, which is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And so I don't know what that sound is, the sounds, the really high-pitched stuff. I instantly think of that because it's probably the scariest sound I've ever heard.
We talked a lot about what makes music scary, and essentially that's the unfamiliar. It's not just, even if I play a dissonant chord on the piano, you know that it's a piano and you've heard that before, but there's a lot of sounds that sound maybe like organic, like maybe they're outside, but we don't know exactly what they are. And that it just really invokes that, innate kind of fight or flight. You listening and like, is this something I need to be worried about or not?
And I think it's, pardon the expression, more insidious in a way. It sort of seeps in. Even though you can hear it, there's something very subliminal about the way it operates on your nervous system, literally. And I think a skilled composer who knows how to use sound, whether it's a screech or a bang or even sound effects, which are musical in my mind as well.
There's some science that says that those high-pitched kind of pings in Scary Movie sound like distressed animals, or it's something in our caveman brain that, is really disturbing. Any sound that's just kind of unnatural and builds suspense, and you're already placing yourself in an anxiety-ridden space, and it feeds onto that. I think it's kind of just the perfect recipe for a Scary Movie soundtrack.
I feel like Under the Skin was really good. I remember that score a lot. It was very visceral.
I was listening to the score of Micah Levy. There's such a weird unearthliness and like an alienness to her composition that I found it it just got under my skin, and even just now gave me a bit of a shiver. There's something really orally pleasurable about it, but it's also like, no, please make it stop.
And you can have subtle scores that are just kind of creeping in. They're telling you how to feel, if you should be scared or not. But then there's some that are just so over the top that they can either take you out of the film or just really totally suck you in.
The Italian horror of the 70s is really that's some of the earliest that I remember really having a strong impact, because of the combination of extreme sounds and extreme visuals and the dream nature of it all. Really that's what struck me more than anything. Really just what am I even seeing and hearing kind of scores.
You're a good composer in horror. You can really push things outside the box. You can do things that, are not standard horror tropes, like the string stabs that we found in Psycho, Goblin were not doing that in Suspiria, in Tenebrae they were, it's a full-on disco funk record. So I think there's all these interesting things that can play into horror movies, and I love when something like that is unexpected.
You're spaced out on sensation, like you're under sedation. Let's do the time warp again.
Horror and rock and roll, I feel have a little bit of an overlap, because in the early days they were labeled dangerous, or they were going to corrupt our youth. And so I feel people gravitate towards rock and roll, and then they gravitate towards horror. And then you have people like Slipknot and Gwar, Alice Cooper, Ozzy Osbourne, people that really went for, melding the two. So I feel there's a danger, there's a kind of fun, there's an escapism, there's a role playing, there's something that makes people want to go kind of see that stuff in the same way that people want to go share horror movies in person.
It's such a fan-driven genre that I think people that get into every aspect of it, from the makeup to the design to the music.
There are things that you want to watch again and again with your friends. You want to see other people's reactions, getting to go listen to the music again, getting to see it in a drive-in, or, whatever different ways there are to consume horror movies. It becomes this nostalgia.
I think there's also an emotion tied to horror scores that isn't always tied to other films. So you get to, again, not only re-experience the film by listening to the score, but you get to re-experience the emotion you felt while watching the film.
All music is a very sensual experience. It enters into us, and our bodies respond to it. And I think the adrenaline that occurs in horror movies with the audience, it's a rush. When you hear that music, it brings the excitement that you felt, that your body felt when you first saw the movie. So you don't need the movie anymore. The music serves that desire for us to have these feelings of the butterflies, the adrenaline, the excitement.